good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you guys are joining us from. This is the Serene View, and this week again, I have somebody else to come on to talk to us about workplace health. So, for those of you who haven't heard, I've been talking about workplace mental health for this is our 11th episode, and the Serene View is really my forum for talking about everything to do with conscious business, the people, the planet, the profits. And today, I'm really happy to have finally gotten somebody who is an expert from Singapore. Yes. And he's Dr. Sanjiv Nair, who is a senior resident in psychiatry here at the Institute of Mental Health. And he's also the vice president of the Young Psychiatrists and Trainees Association. So, Dr. Nair, would you like to introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, thanks for having me here, Siri. It's a pleasure. My name is Sanjiv. I work with the Institute of Mental Health. I'm actually born and raised in Malaysia. I've been here basically since university times, and now I'm in IMH. The scope of my work at the moment is that I'm in the Department of Forensics. We assess individuals who've committed offences and try to communicate to the court if there's a mental illness and whether they contributed to the alleged offence. But we also do general psychiatry, that is psychiatry of all sorts basically. And I'm married here. I have a kid, 8-month-old, who's probably noisy downstairs, which is why I agreed to this interview at such very early hour, so I can hand off the kid. My wife is also doing psychiatry, so that's the other thing.
Well, yes. And for those of you who don't know, Dr. Nair is a public servant who has agreed, today is a public holiday here in Singapore, to an interview outside of his scope of work at 8:30 in the morning. So I was like seriously impressed. I was like, wow, the guy is so passionate about work. Mm-hmm. Yes. Mm-hmm. So yes, I salute you. It makes me feel better about public servants here in Singapore. So tell us, what is the state of mental health here in Singapore? How are we like?
Well, it's very interesting when one asks, what is the state of mental health? Really, the state is very dynamic. It's dynamic not only because of COVID, most certainly it's dynamic because of COVID, but also it's dynamic week to week because, Monday blues, the different kinds of things that happen throughout the week, and especially if you're doing a 9 to 5, Monday to Friday kind of thing. It's dynamic month to month. It's dynamic in the sense that it changes during, say, school holidays, when you have to nurse young children or, your children basically at home while you're trying to get work done. It can be a very stressful time for parents. It's dynamic year to year, depending on a whole host of things, the economy, certainly, but a whole host of other things. And so, yes, it is very different. And you know what, I think you are familiar with a lot of studies, hard statistics, and these are cross-sectional reviews. At any point in time you do surveys, you go to a group of people and you ask them how you're doing right now, or maybe how you're doing for the past, say, maybe 3 months, a year or so. But there's still a cross-section though. If you look at things dynamically in someone's life, they go through periods, they go through phases. It is, they may experience a crisis, but these are all different phases, and one experience them in a longitudinal manner. So it's very, very dynamic. It changes all the time, And so then in my work, basically, you're interested in the individual at that point in time for that particular crisis. You try to make the best out of it.
But do you feel that, like you see people every day, right? Do you feel that you're seeing more people after COVID? Is Singaporeans actually crazier after COVID? No. Or have we always been crazy and there's no difference anyway?
Well, thankfully, COVID doesn't make you crazy as such, not that we know of. But but it's true not just in public health, but I think across the board, I think everyone who's dealing with, anything related to mental wellness would say that in the last year, there's been an uptick in demand, right? Whether this be helplines, emergency services, general practitioners. And the reasons are very simple because, the fabric of things, your routine is disrupted. And during change, that's when, you have psychological crisis. Changes kind of bring about, a kind of unease. If there are certain things that, have been sort of managed in a certain way for a long enough period of time, then when you have a period of change, that's when you're most likely to face a crisis. So we see a bit more during this time, yeah, certainly.
Yeah, I think those friends that I've been speaking about agree with you. I have a friend who runs a non-profit hotline, and she tells me that she's had like a 3 times increase in hotline calls. So I think You're not surprised, right? So are you seeing like three times the patients that you were before?
Well, luckily, I mean, when you work in the public service and any other service, it's quality control. So I mean, you will not see three times the amount because that would compromise on the individual care. So, but most certainly that in terms of allocation of human resource, the hours and all that, all those things, they change. Not least because during COVID, there are a lot of infection control measures. So you try to prevent cross infection in the hospital. So you have to kind of dedicate spaces and all that. So you do certain kind of work in certain settings and more of it. But regardless, across the board, there's certainly increase in demand.
I mean, now that we have all this increase in demand, I mean, who do you think? I mean, should we like be more responsible for our own mental health? I mean, what do you think? Is it because people are not being responsible, like not taking care of their own mental health?
Well, who do I think should be responsible for mental health? I think, well, health in general, any kind of health, and certainly mental health, is at its ultimate the prerogative of the individual. Well, but let me clarify that. I don't mean to say that no one else is involved or can be responsible or can be, kind of help out when someone is in crisis. But ultimately, I would say that, a person's health is their prerogative. And the simple reason is this, because what goes into health, and that really depends on how you define health, right? Because you could say that health is just an absence of illness. I don't think so. I mean, if you're really talking about wellness, you're talking about a certain exuberance, right? A certain kind of aliveness. Uh, and that is health. And that is something we celebrate. That's something we aspire to, we work towards. And that requires constant effort. It is not just about warding off certain illnesses. I mean, by the time you get to a certain illness that, you're pretty far down the line, then you certainly need help. At that point in time, a lot of times you may not even have the insight about what is happening right now because you're just kind of fighting fire, basically. You need people around you to kind of point out, look out for you. But the individual, certainly.
No, okay. So I think, I mean, I agree with you, right? When you say that health is not just no illness, it's like, okay. Also, I must say that you're testing my English. I don't know whether I'm pronouncing it, spelling exuberance correctly, but it's a sense of exuberance, a sense of happiness, right? And
Yeah.
what happens then? I mean, like how do we know when somebody is not there? Like, what are some like almost like first signs that people should kind of watch out for?
Okay. So, the thing is, when you inhabit the state of exuberance, you'll be naturally attuned to the things around you. So now, if you say, for example, what are the signs a leader should watch out for? Now, a leader presumably is responsible, right? Like, over, the welfare, the care of individuals, and the performance perhaps as well in the organization of the individuals under his or her, keep. And to be responsible really just means you're able to respond. That's what it is. And to be able to respond, you yourself need to be in that state of exuberance and joyfulness. Then there will be a sense of inclusion, and you'll naturally then attune to this. There's really no guide, Serene. But the fact of the matter is, generally in workplaces, simple things like performance, MC, someone's taking leave more often. In fact, just physical health issues. Because a lot of times stress does not manifest as just, stress, but stress in the body isn't like it registers in the body. I'm not able to perform well. I feel sick all the time. A lot of headaches, gastric discomfort, this kind of stuff. And when you see this kind of things happening, you just gotta keep an eye out.
Well, I mean, I'm getting very good questions from the audience. So, Dr. Richard has come and asked us, right? How can those struggling with their mental health take responsibility for their mental health, especially given the stigma here? And actually, I agree with them. I mean, if I am going crazy, would I know I'm going crazy? This not doesn't sound reasonable at all.
Well, I mean, the thing is, so in an organization, also, never mind organization, just on an individual level, it is very difficult, you're right, that if you are struggling with something and it can be quite severe, that you may come to a point that you really lose insight. That is really unfortunate. It can be rather tragic. And you're right to say that there's a lot of stigma attached to it. Now, right up to the point where you really, really need help, there are a lot of things, preventive measures that are solely within the prerogative of the individual. Now, if you realize things are not going your way, someone needs to really take stock. What exactly is going on? If you're working, and why are you working? You're working for, to support your family, and you're ultimately doing that for your welfare. But if that is the source of your misery and that's causing you a lot of ailment, then, there is to be a real strong, consideration and reassessment. What exactly is going on? And the other thing is this, it's all about taking a bit of a break. You see, you come to a point where you're really just performing to meet certain matrices, but the most important matrices are that within, to check in basically. And I think individuals really should, of any level, doesn't matter what your role is, really set time to kind of do a check-in, even if it is prior to sleep, but your state of, your health at the moment and what can be done. And that's very important, because otherwise, then really all your focus and attention will be towards trying to meet all these external goals. And then you just kind of lose track after a while, and then you run into a spiral and things get really difficult. What can be done? The thing is this, there's so many different things, but it really depends on the individual, which is why when you seek help, it is all tailor-made to the individual. It depends on your kind of propensity, your like, the sort of stuff that you attune to, more mindfulness. Maybe you need a bit more other kind of work. You need to do a bit more charity work. For example, you go and sweep a temple in the evening so that you can just detach from the sort of stuff that you're doing. So different people, different solutions, but checking in is important, certainly.
So I guess what you're talking about really is for them to do something before they get to a state where they really are mentally ill, to try and do something. What are some of the first things that we should realize that, hey, it's not going well? Or should we even do this when we are well? Like, at what point should we start to do this for ourselves?
So, well, if you if you can sit by yourself, and if there's nothing happening around you, and you feel at ease, then you're okay. Then things can happen around you and you still be fine. But when you are sitting alone, there's nothing really happening around you, and you are uneasy, that's when you say there's dis-ease, isn't it? There's lack of ease. When there's lack of ease, the trouble is not from without, it really is within. And so that trouble within may manifest as things outside, but ultimately it has to do with a lot of work with the individual, depending on their stage of life. It changes. You see, we navigate different psychological crises across our lifespan, and so at different times we have different tasks. A task could be a relational one. It may be about producing something. You feel there's a time in your life where you feel you need to generate things. There's a time in your life where you feel you need to consolidate, figure out what this is all about. But for whatever it is, the task that you're trying to, address, that is a very personal affair.
Michael has a comment as well, but Michael will get to yours in a bit while. Okay. Meanwhile, I think Marcel has something related to our discussion, which says, does sleeping more help? And can I say this? I don't know if you're Singaporean, but Singaporeans sleep on average 4 to 5 hours a day. Like we are known for not sleeping, well, and for not sleeping enough. So what do you think? Is it because we're not sleeping? That's why we're, not doing well?
Is it that people cannot sleep, or they would not sleep? I don't know. I mean,
They would not sleep.
A bit of both. Yeah. A lot of people cannot sleep, and then begs the question: if suppose if you are having trouble sleeping, just falling asleep, then if you think about it, even if you reduce the number of things that you have to do, if you can't fall asleep, and there's really nothing to do during the time where you're supposed to be asleep, but you just cannot fall asleep, then what is really happening there? And then a lot of things may be happening within. See, all our experiences are ultimately generated within. They may be related to and they may manifest as things happening outside. No doubt about that. No doubt about that. But if you about sleep specifically, if you are on your bed and you just cannot sleep, and then that a number of things need to be done to kind of unwind and kind of step back a bit, and many different ways to do that. You see, I mean, like you may identify with your work, with the things that you're accruing, with the, your job title, the money and all that. But ultimately at night, if you're able to step back a bit, then this is all a play, isn't it? Then you're able to just fall asleep like a child. Like, you watch an infant sleep, isn't it? This is so peaceful. And they wake up and they just sort of slowly, gently wake up. But looking at an adult, they wake up in fright because they're constantly hyper aroused. There's always something to worry about, isn't it? We just grow out of that.
I had 2 nightmares last night about missing this early morning on a public holiday live show. So yes, I totally understand. Yes, so there's that not enough sleep and not being able to take care of ourselves. And I think that's really more what we can do for ourselves. And I think Michael's question, which I think I was thinking of getting to, is what about the people at work? Like, we talk about leaders, we talk about managers. Is it possible to create an environment? I mean, what would you advise if I want to create an environment where people feel supported, they feel cared for?
See, now the thing is this, if you are in an organization, so my expertise is in dealing with, individuals, and the individuals as an organism. Okay, so you are an organism, you come with the difficulty, try to figure out what's going on in this organism. But it's not very different from an organization. In fact, the root word is similar. It's organon, which is a tool. And so your body is a tool for you to kind of attain, achieve, do whatever it is you want, but this tool should work for you. It's not working for you, there's something that needs to be done. At the same time, the organization is also a tool. It doesn't matter whether it's for profit or for something else. But the organization needs to perform something that, there's a goal. It has to be coherent in a certain way. In the same way, for example, you wouldn't go to a person and say, who is responsible for your health? Is it your liver, your heart, your kidney? In the same way, in the organization, there's no one particular individual or person, I don't know, I'm not an expert, who is solely responsible for things that are going on. But for you to create a conducive, coherent atmosphere, individuals working there should feel a sense of inclusiveness. And so then any kind of work to direct individuals towards their personal, individual improvement and betterment would ultimately cultivate that environment in an organization. And if that fails, picking up the signs, like I've mentioned before, even if it is not overt, this mental health, someone looking stressed, but just physical health things, if you pick that out and you just attend to them, like you feel like this sense of inclusion, if you attend to them for what they are, you need not be an expert, but you're just able to respond, which is why you're responsible. You need not be able to act. You can just kind of make the necessary referral and guide them along, depending if you have a panel and all that. But if you're just able to respond, that in itself makes a huge difference to people. That's it. Sorry, Serene, I think I've lost you.
It's because I'm muted. That's my favorite phrase this year. I'm on mute. Okay, but yes, I thought Richard has a really good question. He said, are Singaporean managers trained in any way related to the well-being? Is there any idea about how to inject this training at scale? Okay, so Richard, I've been in the workplace mental health space for 15 years now, and I can tell you the answer is no. No, the Singaporean managers are not trained on well-being. Are there any ideas? Well, we have been running workplace mental health programs under the Ministry of Health. I've been doing it for 15 years. I think the ministry has been doing it for way longer than that. And there is still at this moment in time, grants and money being pumped in to try and help companies, create more supportive leadership. We try to train them up to, bear in mind what to do. I think I shared this with you, ABC, right? A, they are a little bit off. We need to do something about it. B, they need a counselor. C, they need to see somebody like Dr. Nair, a psychiatrist, So that's what we are trying to do. Is it at scale? No, very few companies are taking it up. And that's also one of the issues that we are struggling with. Not just us. The ministry is struggling with in terms of mental health. Yeah. I think Maricel was talking about, household workers not getting enough sleep. And yes, in Singapore, that is true. Okay, so if you're talking about like an organization, not like the whole, big company, but just in your household, I think this is true, right? Have you met healthcare home health workers who are coming for help, Dr. Nair?
Almost certainly. They're not exempt from difficulties. It's like any of us. I guess the circumstances are that there's a certain kind of work that is required. But what is also true, that there are many individuals who are doing household work, and there are many foreign domestic workers, for example, who are really exuberant beings, who are incredibly exuberant beings. So the flip side is this, and the question we ask ourselves, if you're really interested in wellness, how do these individuals, working in circumstances that you and I may assume as being quite difficult, and frankly, they probably is very difficult. It can be very hard on the body and the mind, and yet they're really exuberant. And I think that we can really learn from that. And in my experience, frankly, it has a lot to do with spirituality, and a lot of this, especially foreign workers, are very spiritually attuned, and they have systems in place where they can just tune in, and no matter what the difficulty, they're just chugging along. And I think if you can incorporate some of those dimensions into your work and practices, in fact, if you look around the world, some of the most successful organizations are the non-profit ones run with, a kind of a spiritual, sometimes religious kind of a background. People don't get paid, and yet they do phenomenal work. How does that happen? It's a sense of willingness that comes from a deeper dimension, as opposed to having very overt matrices about performance, right?
Well, I mean, Betterai has something to do with that as well. She's like, what suggestions do you have to improve mental health? You spoke about how we should have this, greater sense of purpose, of exuberance. What else is there that we can do to improve our own mental health?
But yeah, so the thing is, my advice is going to be so painfully obvious and it's very unexciting. But the thing is this: very simple, back to basics measures. Eat right. And in the workplace, if you're stressed out, you're going to keep snacks around you and compulsively snack and eat because that's how you cope. And that's not going to work out because you're going to have less alertness, which leads to more stress because of performance issues, etc. You see the spiral? So it's a very simple measure, a seemingly unimportant one, but can make a huge difference, isn't it? So food, certainly. Food, it's the very building block of a lot of our, experiential kind of a dimension. So the other thing is this, so if you take care of food, there are many ways of doing that. If look into it, because that is something that you do a lot every day. The other thing you say, sleeping well, not just sleeping long, but sleeping well. And that comes with a certain kind of practice of just being present and being still. Cultivate a sense of stillness, and there are a lot of studies about this, be it mindfulness, meditation, whatever it is. You see, if there's a sense of stillness within you, there will be a sense of ease. When there's a sense of ease, then the kind of stuff that's happening around you will be less likely to kind of create disturbances within. Does that make sense? If there's no ease, then there will always be unease. And so then practices, we are lucky to be in this part of the world where we have inherited a great deal of religious and spiritual heritage, of various kinds. If you are in a family where you have access to this, tap on it, whatever practices that gives you a sense of grounding, a sense of meaning. If you don't, you could look out for any number of, practices, and secular or religious, it doesn't matter. But these practices make a tremendous difference. Even if it is sitting down and close your eyes, what are you doing? You're not really achieving much. No matrices for that, but a lot of the things is, this is really within. And that makes the biggest difference, really.
Well, Sun has a related comment, which is any advice. I'm not sure that Dr. Nair is a spiritual advisor, but he did ask, so I will bring it up. He's a public servant, okay? A public servant and a doctor, medical doctor. Yes.
Serene is trying to save me from this question. I really appreciate. No, I cannot dispense
Public servant, he cannot talk about religion. No, I'm kidding. Go ahead. Yes.
I cannot talk about, I'm not, or rather, I mean, it's not in my place to kind of give spiritual advice as such, but I would say this. In the theme of stillness, you see, if your life has the experience of your life, whatever it may be, it is all generated within. I cannot emphasize this enough, and so therefore, if you really truly want improvement for yourself and the organization, then really what happens is that you have to invest a lot of time looking within and cultivating that sense of exuberance and stillness. You see the paradox? So when you say exuberance, you may think that you're just kind of going around hyperactive, trying to get your hands in many things as possible. That's not it, The sense of exuberance is that if you just sit still and there's nothing going on within you, you feel at ease and really alive. That is worth aspiring to. I think that is the epitome of mental health. Then nothing can or need happen around you. You're just perfectly happy as it is. And that could be, your goal. Now, if you do that, then naturally, wherever it is you are, you will cultivate a sense of, involvement and interest in people. Have you ever noticed that if you are irritated and not doing well, you couldn't care less about what's happening around you? You really could not, so there's no business for managers and leaders just because they're higher up in the hierarchy. You'd assume they have better mental health. This is not true. And so, the first thing you could do, really invest in yourself in this way, whatever the practice.
Well, Suchi has a long comment. She talks about, that same exuberance that she's talking about, right? She says that exuberance is her default. But there are so many people around us, and they are all kind of not. And actually, yes, the people in this country, I also agree, since I'm also one of the people in this country, I agree, that it's very draining, right? I once told somebody, I don't need to watch The Walking Dead on Netflix. All I need is to take the subway in the morning at 7:30 when I go to work, right? And I look around me and it's the zombie apocalypse, I don't
Yeah.
need to go anywhere on TV to see it. So what could you do? I mean, do you feel this unease?
See, no, the question, interestingly, Suchitra asked, do you feel this disease could point to people seeking meaning and purpose? I think most certainly. Because you see, whatever happens, there will always be this yearning for something more. And hence the restlessness, right? Because there's no point in your corporate life or whatever it is kind of work that you do that you find that you'll be fully content if you're in this mode of just trying to attain and attain and attain. So I mean, you lie to yourself to say that maybe at school after a certain point things will be okay, you get this job, things will be fine, you get married, things are fine. Things are never really fine. They never settle, but really the yearning is within, isn't it? And so then, if if you have experience and you're able to bring yourself into this sense of ease, and Suchitra is great that if you experience this as your default mode, and then your duty, really, you're duty bound, therefore, to go out and spread this. And if you are in presence of people who are really uneasy, you'll be very surprised. The reason why people seek help is because they're trying to rub off. They want a sense of this. You can call it many different things. This is a sense of ease that they see in people, and they try to get help. A lot of things need not be said. It is not a verbal kind of counseling. You just be with someone. If you are in a sense of at ease yourself, then people will just feel at ease as well. And that is your duty then. That is your kind of cultivation, you see. I need not, and again, that experience is within you. So let not, the things around you affect, your, if it does, then it's your duty to take stock at night in your own, journey.
I was going to say, are you putting the burden on those of us who are well? This is terrible. Anyway, Nathan has come with a very interesting question, which is related to what you talk about with Suchi. And that's really, do you have any practical examples of this kind of spiritual aspect, right, that you talked about? I mean, one thing you said is being there with the person. I mean, anything else that you talk about? Anything else you can think of?
Elaborate more on the spiritual aspect of practical examples. Okay, so the thing is this, well, again, we're very lucky in Singapore, many different spiritual and religious heritage. So whatever it is, the kind of practice that you do, a lot of it has to do with a sense of, a lot of the practices, many, be it prayer, be it meditation, it has to do with being mindful, being still. So this could be a very simple thing about really just closing your eyes, focusing on your breath. On the most practical example, in a clinical setting, we tell patients that, you're here, you sit down as you're talking to me. You're talking to me right now. Okay, what is going on inside of you? Sometimes they come in and they're really excited, they're anxious, a lot of things are going on, and they're telling you this, they're telling you that. And then we say, hold on a second, let's come back here. Okay, what is it really that you're experiencing? And so if you bring that meditation, mindfulness, these are not acts, these are states of being. If you do it frequently enough, it becomes your default mode, like Suchitra mentioned, right? It becomes your default. So you carry that with you as you go along. Whatever practice depends on what you have exposure to, your heritage, your family, your religion, whatever. It doesn't matter. The studies have shown, frankly, the modality doesn't count. It is just about cultivating a disciplined practice. If it is a simple thing, again, it's just closing your eyes and focusing on your breath. You do that for 5 minutes, and you realize a lot of things. There'll be a lot of chatter, but that's fine. And that's really fine because, but you're able to get a bit of distance. When you're able to get a bit of distance, then, things kind of, whenever things happen at a distance, it is a lot less threatening. If you see things, you go to a movie and you watch a horror movie, I mean, you can go through that because to a certain extent, there's a bit of distance. You wouldn't want to live through that. You know what I mean? So it becomes from frightening to entertainment. That's how it should be.
Well, I mean, Marisol agrees with you. He says, eat right, do basic exercises and meditation. I think that is
simple.
That is
simple.
Yeah,
No
simple.
cost involved. Maybe the food wise, you invest a bit more, but in the long run, you get your returns. No question. Chronic diseases are a far bigger burden. Like a lot of people are. Yeah, I agree with Dr.
No, I was going to say that, from the people who agree with you, there are also those who don't. They say, yeah, we can be, spiritual without religious, but the struggle, the question is, can we actually do this in the workplaces where everyone is psychologically, struggling? Can we?
Yeah, well, in the workplace, if you bring about, if you look at, there's organizations, for example, that cultivate, say, a morning kind of well, the place I worked previously, what we do sometimes in the morning, we come together and we kind of group and just have a moment of silence and just grounding, for example. This kind of things can be done very easily.
No, wait, hang on. Can I ask you this?
Yeah.
Is the Institute of Mental Health a grounding and quiet place to work in? I mean, that's like completely different from what I expect because most healthcare institutes here are frenetic places.
Frenetic place as well. Well, I think that a
Yes,
lot
I
of the
mean,
grounding. What? No. What? It cannot be. I mean, I hope it's not. I really, I've not had the. I don't know. I don't know how people experience it. But from this side of the aisle, I don't think so. I don't think it's chaotic and frenetic as such. But I mean, for clinicians practicing there, and many practicing there for decades, and they're doing okay. So, so I mean, right? Like, so I get ultimately whatever it is that they're doing is working out. But regardless, like, I agree that you don't have to have a religious component. In fact, if you want to bring something into your workplace, it's very unlikely that you're going to bring in something with a religious component. It just makes no sense. It's not practical, isn't it? And but you unleash something in a workplace where people are struggling. Most certainly, if you are able to become still, a lot of the nonsense kind of filters out. You see, people are kind of they're hyperactive. They're kind of just moving about. They need to do something, write something, report something. That's because you're in a state of uneasiness, isn't it? But if you're able to cultivate a sense of stillness, a lot of that, extra extra fat gets trimmed off.
I think I agree with you. I think we spoke a bit earlier about this organizational drag, and I think that I mean with Dr. Richard about organizational drag, and I think you're right to say that a lot of these additional staff are being
Yeah,
asked simply because people are not, people are nervous or people need reassurance
absolutely.
that stuff is being done.
It's catering to someone's anxiety, whatever it may be.
And Marcelo wanted to know, like, is the childhood a part of this mental health issue? I mean, are people like that because they're not growing up in good childhood?
This is a very tricky question. Marcel, I would say that most certainly your developmental, I mean, you say your family, your childhood history, influences a lot of the ways in which you react, respond, and think about things. Most certainly. But what it also does is that if you are, in the receiving end, or if you have experienced a lot of things that are really unfortunate, that can become a huge strength if leveraged in the right way. All that is needed, it's a bit of perspective and distance. Meaning to say, when you come, for example, and you seek help because of develop abuse, whatever it is. Now, no one can make that experience go away, and nor should they. Isn't that experience is yours, and the best way really to kind of go ahead with that is to really own it and stand on top of it so that it becomes a platform through which you can do your things more effectively. You see, you learn a lot through these kind of experiences, things that a lot of people may not really experience, and that is the leverage, you see. So a bit of distance, and that gives you a huge advantage. When you're embroiled in it, in the thick of it, that can be really draining and that can be really unfortunate. So if you're struggling with that, get some help. When you attain a bit of distance, immediately you're one tier up, 2 or 3 tiers up, you're doing better than before. That's the very definition of a crisis. You evolve out of it and you become better than before.
Well, Sunil was saying about, how can you cultivate this exuberance within a family unit? And actually, I will also say this, I mean, given what we have just discussed, right? I think now a lot of parents are at home and they're stressed out. So how can I avoid kind of inflicting, all this on my children, but really like instead give them a good childhood experience? I'm not saying that they're abusive, but I mean, I don't want my child to grow up in an unpleasant environment either, right?
Yeah. Well, the thing is this: if you find yourself kind of being irritated, losing temper, and just not behaving in a way that you would feel acceptable, then well, that's a reason to pause. And that is it, really. I mean, you first recognize, you see, the instinct often is to say, well, this is happening because I have a young child, because my wife is of a certain way, or because something else is happening. And so, well, if that is the case, then you can't solve it because you really can't fix any of those things, can you? Now, if you recognize that you are responding in a certain way because of an inner experience, that is something you can immediately fix. And how you fix that, again, many different ways. But any exercise or discipline practice that cultivates stillness would bring you to a state of just being equanimous. Equanimous just means that you are able to just willingly do the things that you have to do. See, you are only suffering when you feel forced, right? If you wake up in the morning, you're forced to attend to something, you're forced to do this, and it's and that this the whole thing becomes a drag. But if you are in a state of equanimity and exuberance, and you're just willingly able to do what you need to do, there's no longer a compulsion or a need to act. You know what I mean? And so that is the greatest gift that you can give your family. I feel that's single best thing that you can do with your family, and that requires a lot of work on your behalf. Any parent, and you can bring. And I think children growing up in a family, they see their parents doing certain things, they just naturally follow. So which I feel that can be, something to aspire to.
I was going to say, I don't know how it's like your household, but I find it hard to imagine like going through a whole day without yelling at my child, being like perfectly at peace. I mean, look, I would have to be the Dalai Lama to do that, right? So, no, it doesn't happen in my household. Like,
No, you can yell, but you have to yell joyfully. You see, willingly yell. Don't have to yell. If you do yell, willingly do so.
no, but seriously, like, where do I start? I mean, like, I'm irritated, frustrated. A lot of times I find personally that I cannot cope. I mean, with working at home and with a young child. I mean, I don't find that I have the ability to cope with that. So where do I even start? Because to tell me to be equanimous is like, tell me to climb Mount Everest. It's not happening. Not today. So where do I start?
So, it's the thing is, you're doing a lot. You realize, you're doing this interview early in the morning, you have a family, you have business. It's amazing. You're doing well. All things considered, you're doing really well, isn't it? Like, so you're performing at a
interview my child before you say that.
So, well, I mean, the idea is that you're juggling a lot of things, so that's not easy, isn't like, so you're pushing yourself. That's great. That's really, really great. See, now equanimity, joyfulness, exuberance, stillness, all these things, all of these things are maybe the fruit of a certain labor. You don't go around and figure out how to get a fruit. You figure out how to grow the tree. And to grow the tree, you need, things that don't quite resemble the fruit, isn't it? You need very kind of, you need seeds, soil, things that don't really resemble the fruit, manure. And so, and those things are the things that the practice that you do, which may seem unrelated to the rest of the things that you're doing in the day, but contribute tremendously. If you do that right, if you get that right, the fruits would, the flowers would naturally occur. That is a consequence. That need not be something that we kind of pay attention to. It will just happen as part of what, it's just a consequence of your internal cultivation. And so really look within, and the fruits of that may not be today, may not even be next week or next month, but it's something that will stay with you, and you'll be very thankful for it. Really.
Well, it's there's another comment. Let's see what Suchi says. Yes, Suchi says that we should unleash our anger at the event and not at the child, and offer an explanation about good, detach from the emotion.
Yeah.
I would say this, Suchi, and as the person receiving the advice, that I can do this when I'm calm and like right now, in a good state of mind. But in that very moment, I'm sorry, I really have to say the truth, which is it doesn't happen the ideal way that I would like it to happen. In that moment, when I step in, like, yeah,
I'm sure. But if I could say another thing to what Suchitra is saying, I see the thing about detaching from emotion. Now, I think there's a bit of difference from obtaining distance from emotions and detaching them. And I'll say the difference is this. You see, we experience a lot of emotions throughout the day. And, if you are in a state of stillness, you would experience that emotion in its fullness. If you are angry at someone, you need to really experience that anger. Now, if you don't do that because you feel guilty about it or because you don't want to think about it, then you just kind of distract yourself. Then you want to get a snack, you want to do something else, you write a report, whatever it is that you do, that you're just distracting yourself from the emotion. The emotions are not meant to be kind of just thrown away, avoided. They should be fully experienced. But you can only fully experience something knowing that you can obtain a bit of distance from it. If you can't, then you'll be phobic. You'll be afraid of emotions. That's when you behave compulsively. You know what I mean? So if you feel angry, that's fine. I mean, you experience anger towards your child. I mean, good for you. I mean, that's normal. I mean, if you hear a parent say, "I'm never angry towards my children," I don't know. It doesn't sound right. So
Yes, and Suchi is encouraging me by saying that yes, we cultivate that state. I will try. I mean, after this conversation, I will try. Dr. Nair saw me this morning with my kid. I was, oh, go away, right? So that's
Wow,
why he's
wow.
giving me all this advice. Yes,
You
yes,
see,
but I
you
will
were
try.
dealing with your kid. I locked the door. See, that's the difference. So, yeah.
Yours is 9 months. He can't come after you. That's why. Okay, so I mean, I am mindful that it's already been 40 minutes. I promised him like 20, 30 minutes. It's been 40 minutes. He is a public servant doing this on his public holiday, on his off day. But really, if you guys have any last questions, like send it in. Any last question, just send it in. And the last thing I want to ask you is this: if there's one thing you want to leave our listeners with, like one advice about mental health from all of your work, what would you like to say?
Yeah, I think, aspire to absolute wellness, and to check in yourself. Are you experiencing a sense of aliveness that you would like to experience? If you're not, then there's still work to be done. Don't wait till a time where you're really out of bed and you're in the trenches and struggling before you figure out that you need to do something about it. Because you're right, I think Dr. Richard pointed out, it may be difficult at that juncture. And then you may need to get some help. Get some help. There's no shame in that. Get some help, and the second you do it, you navigate that crisis, and you'll be better off after that crisis. Really invest in your wellness.
Yes, I think Luzanne is saying thank you very much for your insights. Thank you very much from myself as well.
Thank
Thank
you,
you for
man.
taking your time. Really, I mean, I appreciate you taking your time on a public holiday to talk to us about this. I appreciate the work that you're doing to help Singaporeans. And one last comment for Nathan saying that the majority of our frustrations coming from expectations, right? And sometimes we over expect ourselves and others. Yeah. I think I agree with that, right? So, I mean, the things that we expect ourselves to do, we expect others. And so, thank you very much for spending your time with us. For all of you listeners as well, thank you so much for spending your time with me and for all these comments that you're throwing me. I really appreciate it. If there's one last thing that you want to disagree with Dr. Nair, do it before you leave. Yes. Yes, I'm like, making it hard for him, although he's like contributing to Singapore mental health, right? Yes, but thank you so much for today. And next week, we are speaking to a lady who has created a whole instrument to test our mental health from day to day and to kind of help us to feedback to the people around about how we are doing and, where we are going. Okay, so thank you so much for all of you today for joining us. And thank you, Dr. Nair. Thank
Thank you.
you. I hope you guys join me next week. See ya.
Take care, everyone.
Right. Take care. Stay healthy, okay? Don't go and see Dr. Nair. Stay healthy. Yes. Yes, Michael says thank you as well. Stay healthy, okay? All right. Okay, see you. Bye.